Hi, third graders. Hi, everyone. We're going to keep reading from James and the Giant Peach. Last time we joined, the peach started taking off, and Centipede was out there with his teeth, and he was gnawing at the branch that it was hooked onto because they're ready to leave this top of the hill. So, chapter 15. Outside in the garden, at that very moment, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker had just taken their places at the front gate, each with a bunch of tickets in their hand, and the first stream of early morning sightseers was visible in the distance, climbing up the hill to go and view the peach. "We shall make a fortune today," Aunt Spiker said, surprisingly. "Just look at all these people." "I wonder what became of that horrid little boy from last night," Aunt Sponge said. "He never did come back in, did he?" He probably fell down in the dark and broke one of his legs," Aunt Spiker said. "Or maybe he broke his neck," Aunt Sponge said hopefully. "Just wait until I get my hands upon him," Aunt Spiker said, waving her cane. "He'll never want to stay out all night again by this time that I'm finished with him." "Good gracious me, what is that awful noise?" Both women spun around to look. The noise, of course, had been caused by the giant peach crashing through the fence that was surrounding it. And now, gathering speed every few seconds, it came rolling across the garden towards the place where Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker were standing. They gasped. They screamed, "Ah!" They started to run and they panicked. They both got in each other's way and they began pushing and jostling each other because they were each just thinking of themselves. Aunt Sponge, the fat one, tripped over a box that she had brought along to keep the money in and fell flat on her face. Aunt Spiker immediately tripped over Aunt Sponge and came down on top of her. They both laid there on the ground, fighting and clawing and yelling and struggling frantically to get up. But before they could do so, the mighty peach was upon them. Crunch! There was a crunch sound, and then there was silence. The peach rolled on, and behind it, Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker laid, ironed out, upon the grass, as flat and thin and lifeless as a couple of paper dolls that were cut out of a picture book or magazine. Chapter 16. And now the peach had broken out of the garden and was over the edge of the hill, rolling and bouncing down the steep slope at a terrific pace. Faster and faster and faster it went, and the crowds of people were climbing up the hill, suddenly caught sight of this terrible monster plunging down upon them. They screamed and scattered to the right, to the left, as it was hurtling by. At the bottom of the hill, it charged across the road, knocking over a telephone pole, flattening two parked cars as it went by. Then it rushed madly across 20 fields, breaking down all the fences and hedges in its path. It went right through the middle of the herd of some fine Jersey cows, and then through a flock of sheep, and then through a padlock of horses, and through a yard full of pigs, and soon the whole countryside was a seething mass of panic-stricken animals stampeding in all directions. The peach was still going at a tremendous speed, with no sign of slowing down, and about a mile further it came to a village, and down the main street of the village it rolled, with people leaping frantically out of its path right and left, and at the end of the street it went crashing right through a wall of an enormous building, and out through the other side it came, leaving two gaping round holes in the brickwork. This building happened to be a famous factory where they made chocolate, and almost at once a great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes of the factory wall. A minute later, this brown, sticky mess was flowing through every street in the village, oozing under the doors of houses and into people's shops and gardens. Children were standing in it up to their knees. Some were even trying to swim in it. and all of them were sucking it on into their mouths in greedy great gulps and shrieking with joy. But the peach just rushed on, across the countryside, on and on and on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Cowsheds, stables, pigsties, barns, bungalows, hayricks, anything that got in its way got toppled over like a 9-pin, like you're bowling. An old man sitting quietly next to a stream had his fishing rod whisked right out of his hand as it went dashing by, and a woman called Daisy was standing so close to it as it passed by that the skin was taken right off the tip of her long nose. Would it ever stop? Well, why should it? A round object will always keep rolling and rolling if it's going downhill, and in this case, the land sloped downhill all the way until it reached the ocean. The same ocean that James had begged his aunts to be allowed to visit one day before. Well, perhaps he was going to visit now. The peach was rushing closer and closer to it every second, and closer also to the towering white cliffs that came first. These cliffs are the most famous in the whole England area, and there are hundreds and hundreds of feet high. Below them, the sea is deep and cold and hungry. Many ships have been swallowed up and lost forever on this part of the coast, and all the men who were in them were well known. The peach was now only 100 yards away from the cliff. Now 50, now 20, now 10, now 5, and when it reached the edge of the cliff, it seemed to leap up into the sky, hang there, suspended for a few seconds, still turning and turning over in the air, and then it began to fall down, 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 down. Smack! It hit the water with a colossal splash and sank like a big stone. But a few seconds later, up it popped up, and this time it stayed floating serenely on the surface of the water. Here's a picture of it flying off of the cliff before it comes into the sea. Chapter 17. At this moment, the scene inside the peach itself was an incredible chaos. James Henry Trotter was lying bruised and battered on the floor of the room amongst a tangled mess of centipede and earthworm and spider and ladybug and glowworm and old green grasshopper. And in the whole history of the world, no travelers had ever been on a more terrible journey than these unfortunate creatures. It had started out well, with much laughing and shouting for the first few seconds as the peach began to roll forward slowly. Nobody had minded being bumped around a little bit. But when it went bump, and the centipede had shouted, "That was Aunt Sponge," and then bump again, and "That was Aunt Spiker," there had been a tremendous burst of cheering all around. But then as soon as the peach rolled out of the garden and began to go down the steep hill, rushing and plunging and bounding madly downward, then the whole thing became a nightmare. James found himself being flung up against the ceiling and back down on the floor, and then sideways to the wall and to the other side of the wall, and up again to the ceiling, and around and back forth and around and up and down, all being mixed in with all the other creatures flying throughout the air. And they were going in every direction, and so were the chairs and the sofas, not to mention the 42 boots that belonged to the centipede. Everything and all of them were being rattled around like peas inside an enormous rattle that was being rattled by a mad giant who refused to stop. To make it worse, something went wrong with the glowworm's lighting system, and the room was in pitch darkness. There were screams and yells and curse words and cries of pain, and everything kept going round and round, and once James made a frantic grab at some thick bar that was sticking out of the wall, only to find they were Centipede's legs. Let go, you idiot! Shouted the centipede, kicking himself free, and James was promptly then flung across the room into old green grasshopper's thorny lap. Twice he got tangled up in Miss Spider's legs. A horrid business. And towards the end, the poor earthworm, who was cracking himself like a whip every time he flew through the air from one side to the other side of the room, coiled himself up around James's body in panic and refused to unwind himself. Oh, it was a frantic and terrible trip. But it was all over now, and the room was suddenly very still and very quiet. Everybody was beginning to slowly and painfully detangle themselves from one another. "Oh, let's have some light," shouted the centipede. "Yes," they cried, "light! Give us some light!" "I'm trying," answered the glowworm. "I'm doing my best. Please be patient." They all waited in silence. Then a faint greenish light began to glimmer out of the glowworm's tail, and this gradually became stronger and stronger until it was anyways enough for us to see around. "Some great journey," the centipede said, limping now across the room. "I shall never be the same again," answered the earthworm. "Nor I," the ladybug said. "It's taken years off my life." "But my dear friends," cried the gold green grasshopper, trying to be cheerful, "we are there." "Where?" they asked. Where is there?" "I don't know," the old green grasshopper said, "but I bet it's somewhere good." "We're probably at the bottom of a coal mine," the earthworm said gloomy. "We certainly went down, down, down very suddenly at the very last moment. I felt it in my stomach. I still feel it." "Perhaps we're in the middle of a beautiful country full of songs and music," said the old green grasshopper. "Or maybe we're near the seashore," James said eagerly, "with lots of other children down on the sand for me to play with." "Pardon me," murmured the ladybug, turning a trifle pale, "but am I wrong in thinking that we seem to be bobbing up and down?" "Bobbing up and down?" they cried. "What on earth do you mean?" "You're still maybe just giddy from our journey," said the old green grasshopper. "You'll be over it in just a minute. Everyone just has to get their bouts to them." Yes, come on, let's go. Maybe we should all go upstairs." "I refuse to show myself out these doors in my bare feet," the centipede said. "I have to get my boots on again first." "Oh, for heaven's sakes, let's not go through all that nonsense again," said the earthworm. "Let's all lend the centipede a hand and get it over with," the ladybug said. "Come on." So they all did, well, except Miss Spider, who was set about to weave a long rope ladder that would reach to the very top of the ceiling to the bottom of the floor where they were. The old green grasshopper had wisely said that they must not risk going out the side of the entrance when they didn't know what there would be, but they must all first go to the very top of the peach to have a look around. So, a half an hour later, when the rope ladder had been finished and hung, and the 42nd boot had been laced up neatly on the centipede's 42nd foot, they were all ready to go out. Amidst the excitement and the shouts, "Here we go, boys! The promised land! I can't wait to see it!" the whole company climbed up the ladder and one by one disappeared into a dark, soggy tunnel in the ceiling that went almost steeply vertically upward. And that brings us to chapter 18 that we'll enjoy next time. I wonder what they're going to think when they see where they're at. All right, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.